We have to read from there. So, one of you read each sentence, and we'll see whether it's clear, and we'll go on. We'll finish the chapter today.
When his doubts and perplexities are resolved and he knows that it is the divine which must be his law, he aims again and always at such clear and decisive knowledge as will guide him practically to this source and this rule of his future action.
Now, this is a very interesting sentence because he was thinking that he wants a guidance and a law in the physical world. Okay? But he was being told something else altogether. He was not being given a law of the physical world. So, but what Sri Krishna is telling him, that all these laws in the physical world will take care of themselves, okay? You worry about just going to the divine, and I'll tell you how to do it, okay? The aim is not to get a law in the physical world, but the aim is to get to the divine. Yesterday, Gitanjali asked a question, how to get oneness, okay? Then I was thinking the whole day about it, and I came out with this thing, that oneness is a result. It's not an aim, okay? The aim is the divine. And the divine will take care of oneness or manyness or whatever. He will give you the result. So actually this, you don't have to aim at one particular aspect of the divine. That's not the way to do yoga. The way to do yoga is to just want the divine and surrender to him. And he will give you, if he wants oneness, or he will give you manyness or whatever. So oneness is a result. It's not an aim. The aim is the divine. That's what he's saying in this paragraph very clearly, okay? When his doubts and perplexities are resolved and he knows that it is the divine which must be his law, not a law in the physical world, but the divine law. And he doesn't know what the divine law is, but once he goes there, he will get guidance. He aims again and always at such clear and decisive knowledge as will guide him practically. So, again the practical, but go to the divine, the divine will give you a practical result. To this source and this rule of his future. He doesn't know what he has to do, but he will be guided once he goes to the divine. We read the next sentence. How is the divine?
How is the divine to be distinguished among the various states of being which constitute our ordinary experience?
Yeah, that's the biggest problem. The divine may guide us, but it comes down to us and we feel that we are getting the idea. We feel that we are doing, our will is there, our ego is there, our desires are there. How to distinguish which is the divine? Command. That's what he's asking. So,
what are the great manifestations of its self-energy in the world in which he can recognize and realize it by meditation?
How do you realize that the divine is guiding you? So he will tell you now one by one.
May he not see even now the divine cosmic form of that which is actually speaking to him through the veil of the human mind and body?
Yeah, that's another question that arises. I am seeing only Sri Krishna and his physical body, and I am hearing his words and his voice, but may I not see the divine behind this form? That's a question that arises in his mind. May he not even see just now, even in my ignorance, the divine cosmic form of that which is actually speaking to him through the veil of the human mind and body. The body, mind, life is a veil, and behind the veil, the divine is hiding. So why can't I see the divine through the veil? Okay. And
his last questions demand a clear distinction between renunciation of works and the subtler renunciation he is asked to prefer.
Yeah.
The actual difference.
Go ahead.
Shall I continue?
Yes, yes.
The actual difference between Purusha and Prakriti, the field and the knower of the field, so important for the practice of desireless action under the drive of the divine will. And finally, a clear statement of the practical operations and results of the three modes of Prakriti, which he is hidden to surmount.
Which he is bidden to surmount. Yeah. The demand has bidden him to surmount. Now, this is a very interesting one, and we'll go a little into detail. And his last questions last questions are chapter 13, verse 1. Okay, so he is giving the reference. clear distinction between renunciation of works and this subtler renunciation is asked to prefer. There are two things, sannyasa and tyaga. Okay, so sannyasa is the giving up of the physical action itself. I want to get rid of the bad habit that I have of maybe, let us say, drinking or smoking. I'm giving a very simple example. Okay, I may have the habit of anger also, and I want to give up the physical. So I actually give it up to get rid of my desire. That is one way. But Shri Krishna is saying more important is the renunciation of the desire itself. Don't be so worried about the physical renunciation. Renounce the attachment in the mind to what you are trying to get rid of. Okay, so this reminds me of an interesting story of a guru who a disciple came to him and told him that I want to get rid of a bad habit I have. Okay, my smoking, I'm not able to get rid of my smoking. So the guru told him, come back after 1 week. Okay, so when he comes back after 1 week, he says, you have to do it this way, and he explains to him. So he says, why did you take 1 week? So he says, because I myself had the habit and I learned how to get rid of it. And then I'm telling you how to do it. So it is important. Of course, sometimes you have to give up the physical action. Also, Sri says that very clearly, because how to know that the divine, I continue with my habit of drinking, but I claim that I have no desire for drinking. But how do you know it's true? The only test is by actually giving it up physically. So, in fact, that's what Sri says, that austerity is not absolutely essential. Okay. Yesterday we had that interesting example of Nagmasha who wanted a sannyasi, and the Ramakrishna told him, it is not necessary for you to become a monk and give up the physical world. You have to get the liberation even while you are in the physical world without giving up the physical world and the worldly life. So that is what Shri Krishna is telling Arjuna. Don't give up your Kshatriyahood. You are giving up the action of killing and you are thinking that that's a good thing. No, don't do that. Get rid of your attachment and your disgust for killing. Neither should you be attached to your bravery and heroism and the act of killing, nor should you be repulsed by it. Then whatever the divine tells you to do, you do. So that's what he's pointing out. Tyaga and sannyasa. And this is exactly what also Sri says. The bad habits in the physical world will fall off of themselves once you cut the root. The root is more important than the branches. The physical habits in the world are the branches. If you cut, they will grow again. But if you cut the root from there, from where the attachment is coming, whether the habit remains or not has no importance. So that is the real tyaga, the real renunciation. That's what Srimati is saying. Okay? And his last question demand a clear distinction between renunciation of works and the subtler renunciation, that is a cutting of the link of desire in the mind and vital. He is asked to prefer the actual difference between now the second question. What is the Purusha and what is the Prakriti? How to know? My Prakriti is deciding that I don't want to kill my own people. But you are asking me to go to the Purusha. How to distinguish between them? How can I know that it's my soul command? And then he is using the word the field and the knower of the field. This field and the knower of the field, again is in the Gita, Kshetra, Kshetrajya. Kshetra is the manifestation. Okay? Below the supermind, all that is created is a field. Okay? And the knower of the field is a Purusha. Whatever has been created, at the lowest level, what is created is your body, mind, life. That's your field. But the knower of the field is one who understands and separates himself from the field. So that's what all these questions will be discussed afterwards in chapter 14 and chapter 17. the knower of the field. So important for the practice of desireless action under the drive of the divine will. Because if you don't know what your soul is, how are you going to know that it is your the renunciation, the inner renunciation is taking place? How will you know? And finally, a clear statement of the practical operations and results of the three modes of Prakriti. The three modes of Prakriti, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. So, how to get, what are the, how to operate the, yeah, what am I to do with the gunas? Okay, that's what he is explaining. And the results of the three modes of Prakriti, which he is bidden to surmount. When you surmount the three gunas, you become Trigunatita, Atita. You go beyond the three gunas. You are not, in practical terms, you are not subjected to the, you are not a slave to your body, your vital and your mind, which we are now very much. Our body and vital and mind are dictated terms to us, and we follow very happily, thinking that that's my will. Actually, it is not your will at all, it is your nature's will which is imposing itself on you. Okay, so this is what the three questions. The one is, what is the difference between renunciation and tyaga, the inner renunciation and the physical renunciation? Number one. Number two, the difference between Purusha and Prakriti, and an explanation of the three gunas, Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. Okay, now we come to the last para. So all these questions the Gita will answer. Three questions he has asked, and they will be answered. So we read the next para. To such a disciple. One of you has to read.
I'll read, Ranganath.
Okay, go ahead.
To such a disciple, the teacher of the Gita gives his divine teaching. He seizes him at a moment of his psychological development by egoistic action, when all the mental, moral, emotional values of the ordinary egoistic and social life of man have collapsed in a sudden bankruptcy, and he has to lift him up out of this lower life into a higher consciousness, out of ignorant attachment to action into that which transcends, yet originates and orders action. And he has to lift him up out of this lower life into a higher consciousness, out of ignorant attachment to action, out of ego into self, out of life in mind, vitality, and body into that higher nature beyond mind, which is the status of the divine. He has at the same time to give him that for which he asks and for which he is inspired to seek by the guidance within him. A new law of life and action high above the insufficient rule of the ordinary human existence with its endless conflicts and oppositions, perplexities and illusory certainties, a higher law by which the soul shall be free from this bondage of works and yet powerful to act and conquer in the vast liberty of its divine being. For the action must be performed, the world must fulfill its cycles, and the soul of the human being must not turn back in ignorance from the work it is here to do. The whole course of the teaching of the Gita is determined and directed, even in its widest wheelings, towards the fulfillment of these three objects.
Yeah. So this is Shyamdo's very accurate and focused attention, and he is collecting all the information. It is not there in that chapter, but it is collecting. So what are the three things that the Gita is saying? Action must always be continued. The idea that I will give up action in the physical world because it is so limited, like the ascetic is doing, or the Buddhists are doing, or the Mayavadins are doing, is not necessary. They are not saying that it should not be done, but it is not necessary. You can continue to do. If you want to give up and go away, it's all right. You are opting for a very limited purpose. You don't see the glory and the beauty and the wondrous wealth of the physical world and all the planes in between. You are yourself cutting yourself off and imposing poverty on yourself. You are having spiritual poverty. But if you don't do that and accept the physical world, you will get power and you will get ananda, which is the spiritual riches. The others are not opting for that. So they're saying why not? And the Gita also wants that because so three truths. What are the three truths? Action must be performed. Don't give up action so easily. Number one. Number two, why do you have to continue the action? Because the world must fulfill its cycles. The evolution which is there in the physical world has to continue. And if everybody starts giving up the world and going away, how will that continue? You have to be an instrument and you are part of the world existence. So you have to participate in the aim of the world existence. So you have to continue your work. Then, but how do you continue? In ignorance? No, not in ignorance. Therefore, the third truth, the soul of man must escape ignorance and complete his work in the physical world. He has to first of all realize who he really is, lose his identification with body, mind, life, rise to another level of consciousness and continue the work. So these are the three truths. Number one, action must not be given up. Number two, the world has to complete its cycles. Okay. And three, the soul has to rise out of ignorance into the knowledge. And then only you can do your work properly in the physical world. So these are the three things that he is telling you to do. We have time, it's only 8:05, so I'll go through the quickly the para, because again the words are very interesting and they are not to be seen as, we'll relate them absolutely to physical facts, so that it becomes very, very clear. To such a disciple, what is the meaning of such a disciple? One who wants to give up the physical world because he finds it disgusting. Okay, such a disciple, and he is confused. He had certain values, but he is confused. To such a disciple, the teacher of the Gita gives his divine teaching. He seizes him at a moment of his psychological development by egoistic action. All human beings grow by egoistic action. The ego is the helper, and the ego becomes the bar when you want to go beyond it. So don't think that the ego doesn't have a function. It has very much a function. It focuses your attention on your own individuality. And you can't develop yourself unless you are aware of your own existence. That's what the ego does. So the development by egoistic action, when all his mental, moral, emotional values of his ordinary existence, egoistic and social life of man have collapsed in a sudden bankruptcy. Okay. Suddenly, and this happens to everybody when there is a big shock. Okay, when there is a big shock in the otherwise you accept the conditions. I have a family, I have a mother, father, I have children, everything is going swimmingly well. Okay, nothing to worry about. But suddenly something happens which starts making you question the values of the physical world. I'll give you two examples. One was Doraisamy Iyengar. Doraisamy Iyengar was a very, very well-known lawyer, and he was a disciple of Sri Aurobindo. It is he who bought one of the 4 buildings of the ashram, the Rosary Gate, in front of the, opposite to the school gate, okay, on the northern side, there is a Rosary Gate. Nowadays we are using the Rosary Gate. So that building was purchased by Doraisamy Iyengar. And that mother's embroidery department, okay, which is now also attached to the art gallery, that building also was his and he had bought it. His granddaughter, okay, maybe not even granddaughter, maybe his daughter only, she had they had married in a very high family. He was an IAS officer. And they had a wonderful child, a young boy of 10, 11 years old. That boy got run over by a truck one day. Okay? Now just imagine, put yourself in that situation and what happens? All your values, all your suppositions vanishes. What is the meaning of this? If this boy was supposed to die at all, why didn't he die earlier? Why he had to wait for 11 years? You start wondering what is the purpose of life. Okay? So it is a huge thing. Another thing also which I saw, okay, there was a very interesting boy in Pondicherry. He was an idealist. He was a product. There were 2 children, Tamilians, and they were from the Indian Institute of Technology in Madras. Okay, they were idealists. So they came to Pondicherry and they started working in the the Dubrai Pet area in Pondicherry, where the lighthouse is there beyond the park guest house. That's an area where there are lepers, okay, and there's a hospital also there, which caters to the leprosy patients. Leprosy is curable now, so and so they came there and they said that we will start a school for these children. Okay, and they started a school. And idealists, they were both products of IIT. They could have won a very good salary and a very good life, but they decided to do that. And then they were doing. So what they used to do, they opened a press, okay, and they used to make the children go through a school in the morning, and in the afternoon they would ask them to do a little bit of work in the press, so that the press also would go on and they would get their education. Then this boy, I knew him well. He got married, and within 6 months of his marriage, his wife died. Okay. Now, this is the situation that also Arjuna is facing. All the values and everything, all the meaningfulness of life disappears at one stroke. Okay. What is the meaning of this? Okay. Suddenly. Okay. So, he actually vanished. He went away. He went away to the Himalayas. Okay. Completely U-turn. And we never heard of him afterwards. His other friend continued with the press, and I had a relation with him. But this boy disappeared. We don't even know where. He went to the Himalayas. My friend told me that he had gone to the Himalayas. So this is what can happen, and that's what has happened to Arjuna. Okay. Social, egoistic, ordinary and social life of man have collapsed in a sudden bankruptcy. No more meaning in life. And he has to lift him out of this lower life into the higher consciousness. The lower life is level 1, your body-mind life and your ordinary life. The higher consciousness is the level 2, the spiritual planes of consciousness, where you attain to the self or your psychic consciousness. Okay? Out of ignorance, ignorant attachment to action, into that which transcends. You don't feel anymore that you are acting. You feel that your body is acting and you are not acting anymore. You become the witness self. You become the silent witness self. Yet originates.
But Rangana,
Yes, tell me.
no, if some like this incidents happen, you go against God and not towards God. No, there are.
I don't think you are going against God, because God is everywhere.
You don't. No, in the sense you stop believing in His grace or in His this thing, because something has happened to you.
Okay,
which is not you think right.
Yeah, if you think in that way, then there is an element of ignorance, because how do you progress? If you think a little bit, you will see, how do you progress? Do you progress when everything very, very pleasantly is happening to you? Or you want to get rid of your limitations and you are faced with a problem? When you are faced with a problem, there is a tendency for you to either collapse and get depressed, or you, with your spirit of adventure and courage, you face the problem and conquer it. So the difficulties and the sufferings that come in the world have a purpose. This is what Sri Aurobindo goes on saying again and again. And the purpose of suffering in the physical world and unfortunate events becomes clear only when you attend to the self. Then you realize, and then Sri Aurobindo uses word not once, repeatedly in Life Divine and elsewhere, the sufferings of the world are justified. Then you understand. But when you are in the suffering, okay, there is a revolt, which very, very often that happens. Okay, it does happen. But that's not you can't say you're going against God. It's a process. You learn. Okay, that's the thing. It is true what you're saying, that there's a depression, but that's also a part of the journey. When you are going on a journey, there can be difficulties. There can be all sorts of problems. It's not a smooth ride on a national highway. Okay.
Ranganath, in synthesis, Sri Aurobindo says about the many ways in which the turn can come.
That's right.
It can be it's natural evolution of the soul, or you see somebody.
That's right. And 10 ways. He lists 10 ways in the very first chapter.
Yes.
Very first paragraph of a chapter. Yeah.
Correct. So
Yeah,
this could be one of the ways of which the turning can come.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We have to, if you are very weak, then we succumb to it. But if you are strong, you start questioning. You say, why is this happening to me? The idea that God is imposing suffering on you is a very ignorant idea. He is only challenging you. Get beyond your limitations. In fact, we are not even conscious of our limitations. So when this happens, then the limitation gets exposed. Okay? I don't have the power and the courage to face this problem. I should have the courage and the determination to face this problem. So if you, that comes with through the journey of life. Okay? In one life you may not be able to do it, but another life when you have progressed enough, you will see that, oh, this is a challenge being given to me. I will conquer the challenge. So what Pallu asked is true that there can be a depression, but there can also be someone who is not depressed. He takes up the challenge. Let me tell you one thing, okay? There was a lady here who used to look after a boarding. She was a Bengali lady from Lucknow, and she used to speak maybe better Hindi than Bengali, okay? And she came here and she was such a sweet person, very sweet person. She used to look after the boarding, which is called Tanga boarding, you know. Opposite there is a hotel now called Duplex. Okay. Opposite that, there's Gauri's house, and it is called a Tanga boarding. And there are about 10 or 12 children, all young children, and she used to look after them. You know what happened to her? First of all, she lost her husband. Then she lost her two children. But she didn't give up. She came to the ashram and she then she used to say, look what the divine has done for me, what mother has done. I lost two children. Now I have got 12 children in the boarding. And she used to look after them so lovingly, you know. It was very interesting how she used to deal with them. Okay.
And Rangada, there is so beautiful this is. There is another similar beautiful story that I don't remember his name, but there was this gentleman who sold his everything, property abroad as
Yes.
a foreigner, and he came to the ashram. And the last part of the ship, when he was coming off, his ring, golden ring, also fell on the pier and into the ocean. So
Okay.
the first thing which struck him was that, I had given up everything, and then why this ring also fell off, and he was little dejected. But the very next moment, he said, "Okay, this was the last attachment I had, and this too has gone."
Yes. You know the name of the person?
No, 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 I forgot.
Okay. Because there was a very similar person I knew. He was a German, and
Yes, yes, this was a German too.
Survive.
then it's the same person. He used to live very near the press, and we knew each other very well. Okay, and he was a very well-known professor of thermodynamics. Okay, his name was Gunter. His name was
Yes,
Gunter.
yes.
Okay, and this man, he used to live very near the press, and we used to have lot of talks. Okay, once when there was a, rioting in Pondicherry, we were all asked to remain indoors. And we told Gunter to come and live with us in the press for 2 days. We used to get the food and he used to eat with us and he was in the press with us. So he told us his life story. He said he was a very well-known professor of, as I told you, thermodynamics. But he was German. Okay. So he has got a deep life. So he gave up everything and he said, I burnt all my boats, he told me. Okay. I gave up everything. I closed my bank account. I closed this. I said, why did you do that? He said, because I might be tempted to go back. So I closed all the past doors and then I came to Pondicherry. He lived for a long time. He was a wonderful man. So, yes, that also you must have the courage to do that. So sometimes if the courage is not there, then what Pallu said happens. Okay, you revolt. Okay, and then you say, God has done this to me. Actually, He has not done anything. He is actually wanting you to progress, but you have not taken the opportunity. That's
And Ranganatha, one of the stanzas of Amal's poems,
yeah.
they serve like a mantra for me.
Yes.
What is that? Pranam to the Divine Mother, that poem. There is this paragraph that precious each moment laid in your hands, whatever the hue it bear,
Yeah.
a flame and fragrance just because your fingers hold it dear.
Yeah. Yeah.
No? So even when one is, I have seen this that when I was driving from Chennai to Orissa, when I brought both my cars and I was driving one of them and it was almost we were near home, and then the truck from behind came and hit the car.
Okay.
And it could be a very unnerving moment, because the people seated inside and all of that. And I just had this line running, precious is each moment in your hand, just offered it to the mother. And after that incident, people thought I might be very shaken, and they offered to drive, but I was completely calm. And there were 3 more hours they drove and came. So I think this offering at every moment is very powerful.
Of course, remembrance is a very powerful method. Okay, so, yeah, that can happen. Okay, in fact, I'll tell you another little story. There was I forget his name. He was an Orissa boy from a very well-to-do family, but he had some bad habits. Okay, but mother had seen that his soul was there was a possibility in the soul, so she used to tell him, you must come and see me every first of every month. You come and see me. Okay. They had a cinema in Orissa. It is called Grand, and they whatever collection of money we should get from that, they used to send it to the mother every month. They're a well-to-do family. Anyway, so this boy was driving once to come to the ashram on the first of the month, and he had an accident. Okay, and he broke his hand. But what happened was, when he broke his hand, he felt the presence of the mother protecting him. So he used to come and tell here that breaking of one hand, and I had such a wonderful experience, I don't mind even breaking 2 hands and 2 legs, if that is what it can give me. Okay. So this is the answer to the question that we don't turn against the divine. You are not taking the full advantage of what the divine is giving you. He is challenging you to conquer yourself and your limitations. Okay? So this is where the place is a sudden bankruptcy. So we go ahead from there. Okay? Social life of man collapse in a sudden bankruptcy. And he has to lift him out of this lower life into the higher consciousness. The lower life is when you are identified with your body mind life and you think that you are doing everything. And the higher consciousness is you are not identified with your body mind life, you are identified either with the self or the psychic being, and you see that you are not the doer of actions in the physical world. Out of ignorant attachment to action into which transcends yet originates and orders action out of ego into self. Okay, when you are identified with body mind life, you are in the egoistic consciousness. You have to get out of that and go to the self, out of life into mind. Okay, when Sridhar uses the word mind here, he means the spiritual planes of consciousness. Okay. Vitality and body into that higher nature beyond mind, which is the status of the divine. He has at the same time to give him that for which he asks and for which he is inspired to see by the guidance within him a new law of life and action high above the insufficient rule of the ordinary human existence. The insufficient rule of the ordinary human existence is morality. Okay, one word for that is morality. Morality is not enough. Okay, it doesn't solve any problem. With its endless conflicts and oppositions, perplexities, and illusory certainties. What you feel, I am certain of that, and I know that this is my thing. That's what is happening to Arjuna. Okay, all his certainties have collapsed. A higher law by which the soul shall be free from this bondage of works. He is feeling that his work is that of a Kshatriya. Suddenly he sees that, my God, that work is horrible. So he gets confused. And yet powerful to act and conquer in the vast liberty of the divine being. Because he is identified with a body mind life, he is bound to his works. But when he is not identified with the body mind life, he will continue the work but he will not be, he will be free from the actions. He will be free from the results of the actions. The law of karma ceases for the soul. Okay? The law of karma continues for the body, mind, life, but not for the soul anymore. For the action must be performed. The world must fulfill its cycles, and the soul of the human being must not turn back in ignorance from the work it is here to do. The whole course of the teaching of the Gita is determined and directed, even in its widest wheelings, when it is discussing other things also. These are the three main objects, towards the fulfillment of these three objects. So, again to repeat, the three objects are: don't give up the physical world so easily and the action thereon. Okay? Continue to do karma yoga, and you must participate in the world action so that the evolution continues. Okay, so in fact, the Gita constantly uses the words Sarva Hita Bhute Rata. You are engaged in the good of all creatures. Okay. Or Loka Sangrahanartham. Okay, you are acting Loka Sangrahanartham for the maintenance of the physical in the world. So these are the two words that the Gita uses to clearly say that you have to participate in the world action. You have to continue. And how do you do that? The soul must rise from ignorance to knowledge. So these are the three truths that he is insisting on. And the next chapter is exactly that. What is the core of the teaching of the Gita?
Rangana, I had one question.
Yeah.
If in a nutshell, you have to say that why was Arjuna chosen and not Yudhishthira or Nakul, Sahadev, Bhima?
Because they are at a better level of consciousness. So is very clearly taking, we discussed this question, okay? The Gita is giving knowledge not to the spiritual man. The Gita is making its rule of action for the ordinary man, not the absolute ordinary man, but the ordinary man who is now ready for a spiritual life. That is Arjuna. And Bhim is much, much lower level, so it is not he, neither Nakula or Sahadev. And the other one, Yudhishthira, is at a much higher level already, so he doesn't need the guidance. So this is in other words, it is symbolic of what the Gita is wanting to do. It is giving knowledge to how to live in the physical world. When you are identified with your body, mind, life, and you are ignorant, how to come out of that. So that's it. Srivni is going on stressing that. If you remember, in the earlier chapters, he is going on repeating again and again and again that the Gita is serving the purpose of teaching the man who is ready for a spiritual life. That is why Arjuna. He is not a spiritual man, but he is developed enough to understand that he has to now cross his limitations. That's why Gita, the Arjuna. Okay, so
Thank you.
yeah. Okay, so we have 10 minutes.
You know, there are two other stories which mother has told.
Okay.
One story was she knew some man in France.
Yeah.
And in those days, they used to sometimes have a lucky penny.
Okay.
And this man found a lucky penny.
Okay.
So he kept this lucky penny and he was poor. But every time he would touch the lucky penny and things would improve and he became very rich.
Okay.
Then he carried this lucky penny in his huge overcoat.
Okay.
Then one fine day he said, let me have a look at my lucky penny.
Okay.
And when he opened it, he found that it wasn't the original lucky penny, but it was something else.
Okay.
Then his wife tells him that yes, one day when she was washing or something, that lucky penny went away. So she put another penny and wrapped it. But he kept on thinking that this is my lucky penny. And that's how he became rich and all.
Yeah.
So then he says, this is not the lucky penny which is doing anything. This is something much higher which is working.
Exactly.
So he gives up his attachment to the lucky penny.
Yeah. So,
And the other story is that there was this foreigner who was coming to Pondi, and I think he was jumping the boat between Sri Lanka or Pondi or wherever. And he always had a small golden pen given to him by his father or grandfather. And he was highly attached to it. And when he was jumping over, that golden pen fell in the sea.
Okay.
And he was very upset. But he said, okay, maybe I am coming to Pondicherry, and if this is what I have to do, I have to give up attachment to something which I was so attached to.
Yes. So he took it in the right way. He did not. So he is benefiting. That's what. These unfortunate events are always more useful for teaching us how to live life than the pleasant experiences. The pleasant experiences can also teach you, but the unpleasant experiences can teach us much, much more because they are the challenge presented to you, and it is like the divine is saying, look, this problem is there now, get rid of your limitation. They show you all these things. In fact, what happens in yoga, when you start doing yoga, those things which are there in you, all the difficulties, they come up. And so they're saying, you must not think that you are sliding down. They come up and they are saying, get rid of me. The difficulties come up and they sort of get increased. Suppose you have a habit of anger, okay? The anger will go on coming up until you are able to reject it. It is offering itself to be rejected. This is how you have to see the difficulties and the unfortunate incidents. Okay, so we have 5 minutes. I think we can read the next chapter. We can read one para at least. Okay.
Do you want me to read?
Yes, go ahead. Yasmin, core of the teaching.
The core of the teaching. We know the divine teacher, we see the human disciple. It remains to form a clear conception of the doctrine. A clear conception fastening upon the essential idea, the central heart of the teaching, is especially necessary here because the Gita, with its rich and many-sided thought, its synthetical grasp of different aspects of spiritual life, and the fluent winding motion of its argument, lends itself, even more than other scriptures, to one-sided misrepresentations born of a partisan intellectuality. The unconsciousness or half-conscious wrestling of fact and word and idea to see a preconceived notion or the doctrine or principle of one's preference is recognized by Indian logicians as one of the most fruitful sources of fallacy, and it is perhaps the one which it is most difficult for even the most conscientious thinker to avoid. For the human reason is incapable of always playing the detective upon itself in this respect. It is its very nature to seize upon some partial conclusion, idea, principle, become its partisan and make it the key to all truth. And it has an infinite faculty of doubling upon itself so as to avoid detecting in its operations this necessary and cherished weakness. The Gita lends itself easily to this kind of error because it is easy, by throwing particular emphasis on one of its aspects or even on some salient and emphatic text and putting all the rest of the 18 chapters into the background or making them a subordinate and auxiliary teaching, to turn it into a partisan of our own doctrine or dogma.
Okay, so he's warning us here that the Gita is very often misinterpreted, and he is going to list three misinterpretations in each paragraph. The first one is the renunciation of works. Okay, this is much misunderstood. If you want a spiritual life, give up the physical world. This is the first mistake that people make. The second is that only devotion counts. The Gita is telling you that bhakti is the most important. That also is a mistake because the Gita tells you also jnana as well as karma. So that's the second mistake. And the third mistake is you think that karma yoga, Gita is telling you karma yoga. Okay? Some of the most well-known people in India also used to say that. Karma yoga is the most important. No, it is definitely important, but also Jnana yoga, also Bhakti yoga. So these three, he will tell you in three paragraphs, the misinterpretation of the Gita. Okay? And he is telling you that this human reason has got this defect that it always stresses one side of the truth. That's why we have so many opinions. Okay, we don't see the other side. So a wide-minded person tries to see if there is any reason even in the opposite opinion. This is what Shraddha is warning, and he's using a very interesting word. He's saying one of the most fruitful sources of fallacy. What is that? The one-sidedness of reason. Reason is analytical. And when it is analytical, it sees only one aspect. It does not see the whole. If it sees the whole, it is synthetical. And that is when you go above the mind, above reason. So that's what he's telling. So we'll stop here.
Sometimes, Rangada,
Yeah,
sometimes when we understand the other side also, then you cannot come to any decision, no?
Yeah,
You-
that's true. And yeah, that also is a fact. That is what happens, okay? In fact, there is a very famous example in philosophy which explains this fact that you must. I know, I had a student once, okay, who was a very interesting girl. She says, I am interested in spiritual life, but I am also interested in the um, in the in the worldly life. So I don't know what to do. So this situation is very often pictured by this. It's called Balaam's ass. Okay, in philosophy, this ass has got two bundles of very succulent, nice, fresh grass, one on the left side and one on the right side. Now, this ass is thinking that let me eat this one on the right side. Then suddenly he thinks, but what has the left side done? I should start with that. So he says, okay, then I'll start with the left. As soon as his mind goes to the left, he says, but right also is there. Why should I not take that? So the story goes that he dies of starvation. Okay, without eating. So this is something that happens. You have to take a decision between the two and continue with the attitude that I will come to the truth, but right now my mind is telling me that this is more correct than the other one. So you should not become actionless with confusion. You should take action and wait for the truth to dawn on you. That is it. So that is what
What is the story's name you said? Who's as?
it's called. Balaam's and Balaam, Balam or Balaam. Okay, I think you can try Google it and see whether you can get that. Okay, it's a well-known example in philosophy.
So from here comes the saying that the grass is always greener on the other side.
No, that's a different thing.
Okay.
That is envy, human envy. What you have, what you don't have is more precious than what you have. That image of the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence, that is a example of envy, human envy. What we don't have, we value more. And the moment we have it, we don't value it anymore. Okay. Okay, then we have gone 2 minutes past our time. So I say au revoir to all of you.
Merci beaucoup.
Au revoir. See you next Tuesday.